Introduce our last speaker of this year's webinar series. You've heard from Regina in the introduction that we have sort of 5 core cities that we're focusing on in this project, Berlin, London, Paris, Warsaw, and Istanbul. But with this webinar series, our goal is also to sort of extend some of the questions that we're asking and thinking around other sort of theatrical landscapes where this question of the urban is particularly relevant. And today's speaker is an example of this kind of branching out, this trying to make connections among different fields and different locales. So let me introduce you to Hanna Huber. Hanna defended her doctoral thesis performing on the fringe, examining the neoliberalism of the Festival of d'Avignon at the University of Vienna in Austria in 2024, which included research stays in Avignon, London, and Edinburgh. Hanna successfully completed theater and film and media studies, English and American studies, as well as Romance studies at the universities of Vienna, Malta, and Avignon. She's currently employed as a postdoctoral researcher at the Department of Education in Vienna and conducts research there to mixed methods, examining organizational structures and work practices in self-organized video projects by young people presented at the Video and Film Tage Festival in Vienna. Today, Hanna is going to talk to us about these doctoral research findings. She's going to share a talk with us entitled Beyond the City Walls, Socio-Spatial Divides at the Festival of d'Avignon. Thank you very much. Welcome, Hanna.
Right, thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction and also for the invitation to the webinar series and the opportunity to share my research. I will briefly share my screen so you can see my PowerPoint. All right. Okay, good. So as Cleo already introduced, the title of my talk today is Beyond the City Walls, Addressing Socio-Spatial Divides at the Festival of d'Avignon. And what I present, so you should see my second slide, I think it should work. What I present today builds on the results of my PhD project that focused on the transformation of the Off Festival from countercultural movement to a neoliberal performing arts market. And my PhD project was conceptualized as mixed method research, so as a combination of quantitative and qualitative methods, and therefore I conducted semi-structured interviews with artists, theater directors, production managers, programmateurs, and representatives of various associations standing in relation with the Festival of d'Avignon, as well as performance analysis of plays that I selected according to their dissimilarity of genre, venue, number of performers on stage, time of day, and duration, in order to gain a varied picture of shows presented at the Off. Participant observation at 4 festival editions, and archival research at 2 local archives and 1 theater. And last but not least, a quantitative data analysis of the festival program in 2019 and a comparative analysis of the 4 festival editions. And for today's talk, I shift the focus slightly to address the following questions. In what ways is the Festival of d'Avignon shaped by its urban environment? How does the concentration of festival activities within the city center, Intramuros, influence working practices and theater aesthetics? What potential do artists perceive in expanding the festival beyond the city walls, extramuros? And what initiatives have been undertaken to date, and what effects have they had? Before presenting my results to these questions, I want to outline the research field for those who do not know the Avignon festivals yet. So there exist 2 large summer festivals in Avignon. The Festival d'Avignon, that was founded by Jean Vilar in 1947 with the aim of establishing a théâtre populaire. And the Festival d'Avignon hosts and co-produces international productions at large scale, staged in renowned venues such as the Palais des Papes, the Pope's Palace in Avignon. And my research and also the talk today focus on the Off d'Avignon, which is a non-juried open access fringe festival. The Off d'Avignon started as counter festival on the fringe of the Festival d'Avignon on the initiative of one local amateur artist, André Benedetto, who staged Statue at the Théâtre des Carmes in July 1966 without having been included in the official festival program. Though criticized at the time, this act is now seen as the birth of the Fringe Festival of d'Avignon, as it inspired artists from all over France to follow his example and to come uninvited to perform on the Fringe. The Off Festival's genesis is shaped by the events in July 1968. In particular, the arrest of the amateur artist Charras Gelas and the performance ban of his first full-length play L'Appellation sans nu, the Enragé of May 68 in Paris descending to Avignon, Jean-Jacques Lebel criticizing the Festival d'Avignon as supermarché de la culture, and the Living Theatre's Paradise Now, staged at the Cloître des Carmes. By the 1970s, theater curators, so-called programmateurs, began scouting innovative productions at the Off, establishing it as a highly relevant platform for independent artists to showcase their work. And what you see in this photograph is a common practice for Off artists advertising their indoor shows and distributing flyers. In 1982, when the Off already counted 139 shows and 42 venues, one artist, Alain Léonard, founded the first Off Festival organization, APO, Avignon Public Off, to summarize all contributions in a printed program. And you see the first edition in the illustration on the slide. But the organization does not undertake any artistic selection, so the Off remains a non-juried open access fringe festival. And until today, the festival organization, which is now AFC, Avignon Festival et Compagnie, since 2006, emphasized their role as neutral custodian of the open access event, being responsible for administering but not curating the festival program. So it is comparable to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society. In the 1980s, the rising demand for performance venues led the municipality of Avignon connect artists with local proprietors of non-theatrical spaces. Shops, restaurants, and apartments in the city center have been replaced by theaters that operate in July only and remain deserted during the rest of the year. Year-round operation of all of theaters would not be economically viable due to lower attendance outside the festival season. And one should not forget that the population of Avignon multiplies by 3 in July with an influx of theater tourists. According to Kevin Bernard's data collection, the Off counted 718 venues from 1966 to 2017, and only 5 venues partook in the Off for over 40 years, while 320 venues already closed after one festival edition, which Bernard concludes gives the Off an ephemeral taste. So the high number and short lifespan of Off venues illustrate that the festival's open access policy tempts many to establish their own theater, only to abandon it after a few editions. So the Off started with one venue, Benedetto's Théâtre des Carmes in 1966, and counted 139 venues in 2025. Data in this bar chart is taken from 4 different sources that slightly deviate in their results, but they show an overall comparable trend. Most venues are located intramuros, which is within the city walls. And here you see a map of Avignon with intramuros displayed in violet. What is important to note at this point as well is that the composition of the Off, being a non-juried fringe festival, has not been designed in a pre-planned manner by private or public entities. Rather, it has evolved over time as the sum of millions of individual calculations and decisions made by acting companies, venue owners, and festival visitors. On the following map of the Off 2019, every red dot marks the position of a theater. The venue's geographical location is of decisive importance when it comes to visibility and attendance figures, which accentuates the intra-extramuros separation. Although artists often advocate expanding the off-extramuros, so outside the city walls, which offers sufficient space for larger theaters, festival visitors have so far shown little interest in taking public transport to explore more remote districts. And even acting companies who stage their shows outside the city walls parade along the Rue de la République or the Place de l'Horloge in the center, as they would not otherwise attract an audience. So street performances, colorful posters, theaters on every corner, hordes of joyful festival visitors, and the medieval architecture of the Old Town combine to create a festive, folklore-rich atmosphere concentrated primarily in Avignon Intramuros. The city walls intensify the experience of entering a framed festival area. Tourists, visitors, and artists arriving at the central train station find themselves directly in front of the impressive stone gate leading to the Rue de la République, and drawn in by the lively atmosphere, they are unlikely to walk in the other direction to discover performance venues like L'Entrepôt, which is situated just right behind the train station. So it seems that the festive atmosphere framed by the city walls accentuates the intra-extramuros separation. When comparing the previous bar chart with the number of shows, we notice a stronger rise in the number of shows than in the number of venues. So the spatial capacity in Avignon Intramuros is limited, and therefore venues today host on average more shows than they did several decades ago. Due to the high demand for performance venues, 57% of Salles Intramuros schedule 8 or more shows per day, leading to an incredibly dense schedule at Salles in the city center. And in the following bar charts, I compare conditions Intramuros, which I marked in blue, and Extramuros, marked in orange. The higher the number of time slots, the shorter the duration of each performance. 2/3 of all shows staged at the Theater Intramuros take only between 60 and 80 minutes. 38% of all performances Intramuros are preceded by 20 to 30 minutes of pause, and that is the time spent for both the preceding or previous acting company to strike the stage and the following to mount their set, which effectively cuts the time in half. And little time for mounting and striking sets noticeably affects the elaborateness of the stage design and the props. To illustrate this observation, I chose one day at the Off d'Avignon, namely the 13th of July 2019, to visually depict the exact duration of each performance and pause per salle from 9:30 a.m. to midnight. And I will take the extract marked in blue to explain the illustration in more detail. So each bar represents the duration of a performance, and the space in between the marks or in between the bars marks the pauses between the performances. The colors indicate the number of performances per salle. And when comparing this illustration with the venue's programming, it is noticeable that the differences in the number and duration of performances and pauses correlate with the venue's distinct artistic orientations. Of venues presenting a higher number of shows per day with shorter pauses, as was the case at Le Palace, Paradise République, Capitole, and Plage Théâtre, all located Intramuros, stage primarily stand-up comedies, as this artistic genre often involves only one performer, a minimal stage design, and few props. The high occurrence of solo shows is remarkable at the Off d'Avignon, accounting for 37% of Intramuros productions. And this demonstrates that spatial density and stage size, tight time schedules, as well as budgeting concerns entail a reduction in the number of performers. So during my research, I came to the conclusion that the concentration of off venues intramuros presents several challenges, like high rental fees, small stages, cramped auditoria, limited storage, rapid show turnovers, and intense competition for visibility, all of which affect artists' work and well-being. By contrast, off venues extramuros, so outside the city walls, allow artists to first escape the speed and density of the festival hotspot, and second, to reach new audiences on the periphery. Yet initiatives relocating festival activities outside the city walls have had limited success so far, and I will expand on this and also explain why. As early as 1983, Alain Léonard, founder of the first off-festival organization, Avenue Public Off, encouraged festival visitors to explore more remote venues. I quote, "Your choice of shows should not be limited to the city center. Many shows are staged extramuros and require only some minutes of transport." And by the way, I've translated all French quotations into English for reasons of legibility. So Alain Léonard already encouraged visitors to explore more remote off venues. However, as Alain Brunswick observes in 2005, efforts to externalize at least a part of the off had little success due to the centralization of spectators, journalists, and theater professionals. And also today, festival visitors show little interest in exploring more remote venues, and acting companies that stage their shows outside the city walls parade in the city center, as they would not otherwise attract an audience. The concentration of festival activities in the city center also highlights issues of social in and exclusion among artists and visitors. Marianne Johansson states in City Festivals and Festival Cities, and I quote, "Physical and social dimensions are inseparable. Festivals that physically rearrange the cityscape are also part of social reconfigurations in terms of upholding or disrupting established social patterns. And these practices are further shaped by economic forces." End of quote. So the intra-extramuros divide in Avignon reinforces social inequalities among off artists. Central venues, intramuros, with higher rents and greater visibility, favor affluent and subsidized acting companies. So financial resources spent on venue placement and promotion significantly impact acting companies' visibility and consequently the economic success of their festival participation, including sold-out shows, reviews, and touring opportunities. In the following, I will present some initiatives relocating festival activities outside the city walls, one being La Manufacture. And here, theater director Pascal Kaiser moved extramuros after off artists criticized his intramuros venue as too small for contemporary creations. In 2005, La Manufacture opened an off theater at the welfare facility in Saint-Germain, which allowed for a larger stage. The venue is equipped with a metal grid to which spotlights and stage elements can be attached, enabling rapid scene changes and expansive stage design despite the succession of several performances per day. The venue also provides rooms that artists can use for rehearsal, and in our interview, Kaiser emphasized, I quote, "These measures create work conditions that cannot be found in a city center." End of quote. And according to him, the relocation of off venues to poorer districts and also the inclusion of local young people as staff contribute to overcoming the geographical and social boundaries of festival spaces. Since 2008, the annually convert the patinoire, an ice skating rink extramuros, into a third off venue, providing more space. In addition, storage provides 16 square meters per acting company compared to only 4 square meters at their intramuros venue. And to make their remote venues easily accessible and to also ensure regular attendance by spectators, journalists, programmateurs, La Manufacture operates a shuttle bus from the city center, which is included in the ticket price. And Kaiser argues that the 10-minute bus ride before and after the performances fosters encounters among spectators, enabling them to discuss their interpretations of the play, because otherwise they would only rush from one theater to the next. And La Manufacture's strong programming, their media outreach, the free transport, they indeed draw both spectators and programmateurs to their extramuros venues. However, artists often feel deserted at their extramuros venues, and one example, Alexis Armengol, recounts his experience of staging Vue d'ici at Saint-Germain in 2021 in our interview, and here I want to quote, "We were frustrated at the chateau because with the shuttle bus, people left immediately after the performance." End of quote. So even though the show was successful in terms of attendance, the audience took the shuttle bus back to the city center and did not stay to talk with the artists. And I quote Armengol again, "What we like about Avignon when we performed at La Manufacture Intramuros is that people stayed for a drink in the courtyard and we could talk." End of quote. So the exchange between artists and audiences is often cited as one of the OFF's greatest benefits. Another aspect that I do not want to leave unmentioned at La Manufacture is that the venue La Manufacture providing well-equipped stages for contemporary creations and offering support staff and press spokespersons, they're among the most expensive of venues. So La Manufacture charges very high rental fees, making it accessible only to subsidized acting companies. Another example is L'Entrepôt, that is based on a different business model. L'Entrepôt began in 1982 as an amateur theater association led by Michel Adala in the extramuros working class district Montclar. Her acting company Mise en Scène uses the space for year-round projects aimed at, and here a quote from their website, bringing together the population in their diversity and breaking cultural, social, and personal isolation. End of quote. So also several of my interviewees view L'Entrepôt as a pioneer for socially conscious practices at the OFF Festival, as the venue resists the festival's neoliberalization by scheduling fewer performances and offering more relaxed working conditions. In 2019, for example, L'Entrepôt hosted 4.4 performances per day, with an average of 84.6 minutes for set changes, compared to the OFF average of 6.3 performances and 52.9 minutes. Venue director Michel Adala argues, I quote, "We don't follow the same logic and mission as most OFF venues, but we are recognized in the festival landscape." End of quote. So L'Entrepôt stands out for local engagement, year-round projects, diverse artists and audiences, community building efforts, and collective performance space. Some artists also advocate going even further by expanding the OFF not only to the periphery of Avignon, but also to other cities. And one of my interviews emphasized, I quote, "Just as economic centralization in Paris is highly problematic, cultural centralization in Avignon entails many problems." End of quote. And these problems include an overcrowded city center, lack of space for artistic creation, growing competition, reduced visibility for individuals, rising rental fees, high living expenses, and ecological damage caused by the wasteful overproduction of promotional print material. A cultural decentralization from Avignon to other regions would remedy these conditions. And this has partly been achieved as musicians have their festival in Bourges, circus artists in Aurillac, and puppeteers in Charleville-Mézières, each with their own non-juried OFF festival. Yet, programmateurs consider it convenient to have all disciplines of the performing arts concentrated in Avignon, such that a short-term stay in a single city suffices to plan their next cultural season. Before coming to the end of my talk, I briefly want to point out how COVID-19 has temporarily changed the situation. In 2020, both summer festivals in Avignon were officially cancelled. When the first wave of the pandemic gradually receded, government restrictions were eased. The lockdown was progressively lifted from 11 May 2020, and cultural venues were permitted to reopen from 2nd of June 2020. It was the 15th of June in Ile-de-France. And also the cultural minister at that time, Frank Riester, announced that petit festival, so small festivals, would be allowed, provided that audience capacity restrictions were observed. These conditions prompted the simultaneous emergence of various micro-festivals. Also outside Avignon, artists launched small-scale festivals in other regions, aligning with calls to decentralize and deconcentrate productions beyond Avignon's overcrowded theatre festivals. So the official cancellation of the Festival of in 2020 prompted acting companies that make an annual pilgrimage to Avignon in July to launch initiatives in their hometowns. And one example is Pierrette Dupoyer, who staged 4 of her salons scène in her own garden in Le Villeroy in Touraine. Spectators were asked to book in advance and to wear a face mask during the performance. And in our interview, Dupoyer emphasized, I quote, "As long as an actor can speak, as long as they can express themselves, as long as they can write what they think, they exist." End of quote. So she recalls that she has never stopped acting for more than 6 months. And based on audience reactions to her performances in the countryside in 2020, Dupoyer concludes that people greatly enjoy, appreciate, and need theatre. Also, Paris saw the creation of small-scale theatre festivals by off artists. Mathieu Tusset and Édouard Chapeau took the exceptional circumstances as an opportunity to found the Paris Off Festival, which hosted 15 shows. And these shows had originally been programmed at venues for the Off d'Avignon in 2020. Tusset argued, I quote, "Theatre should live everywhere, not only in the Pope's city." End of quote. So the alternative festival also aimed to recreate a networking platform between acting companies and programmateurs. 1 year later, in 2021, the Festival of d'Avignon did take place, yet in a reduced form due to state-imposed health measures. For instance, every venue had to employ 2 médiateurs COVID trained to ensure compliance with health and safety regulations, and in the event of an infection, to trace the affected spectator and to inform all contacts. Spectators had to wear face masks during the performance, and venues had to be ventilated and disinfected between the performances. The latter also brought significant improvements for acting companies, because the 45-minute pause between the performances used to ventilate and disinfect the venues gave off artists more time to set up the stage, to warm up their voice and their body, to put on their costumes, to prepare for their performance. In previous years, the large number of shows led venue owners to continually reduce the time reserved for each performance. The actor and metteur en scène William Mesquich told me in our interview, I quote, "2 years ago, I had to set up a stage in 10 minutes. 10 minutes, we make mistakes. We can hurt ourselves. We're not well. It generates an urgency that is not desirable when creating. Due to the pandemic, venues host only 6 or 7 shows per day, which provides some latitude to set things up." End of quote. So longer breaks between performances reduced the speed and density at the festival hotspot Intramuros, allowed artists to create more complex stage designs and to take more time to prepare for the performance. Following the festival cancellations in 2020 and the reduced edition in 2021, with around 1,000 shows, the off returned to near pre-pandemic scale in 2022 with almost 1,600 shows. And also the following festival editions let assume that this trend was only temporary and that the off has returned to its hyper-concentration in Avignon. I will come to the conclusion of my talk and also to leave time for the discussion. So what we have seen is that the concentration of festival activities in the city center, which offers visibility and economic success, exacerbates the intra-extramuros divide. So the concentration intramuros, it also presents several challenges like high rental fees, small stages, cramped auditoria, limited storage, rapid show turnovers, and intense competition for visibility, all affecting artist work and well-being. By contrast, off venues extramuros allow artists to first escape the speed and density of the festival hotspot, and second, to reach new audiences on the periphery. However, efforts to externalize at least a part of the off had little success so far due to the centralization of spectators, journalists, and theater professionals intramuros. And as non-juried fringe festivals operate as self-organizing systems, targeted subsidies by public and private institutions are essential to support initiatives outside the city walls and to promote socioeconomic balance. So with that, I've come to the end of my presentation. I thank you for your attendance, and I'm looking forward to your comments and your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hanna. That was fascinating.